Okay, looks like we're recording, and I am super excited to have on the program George Martin, who goes by Carnism Debunked on YouTube and social media. I've been a longtime viewer of George's content, and I'm super excited to meet you for the first time, George. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Good to be on.
Yeah, so like I was saying before we even got started, you had sort of been on our short list of people to have on Wayne's program. So I was really glad to see you get on Wayne's program recently and talk to him about things. And it was one of the more enlightening conversations I think that I've seen on his channel for a while. I also really enjoyed the one you did with Natalie Fulton. So we'll get into some of that stuff. Like I told you, like I was sort of interested in following up on some of those conversations. I do want to start though with one of your videos that really stood out to me. Like, this is what I like about your channels. Every now and then you kind of just throw some curveballs in there. And the video that really grabbed my attention was the one you did about that short story, the ones who walk away from Omelas. So I read that short story this morning, found it pretty striking too. And that was just a really interesting. I enjoy like when people are bringing up ways that they see sort of a vegan message or are able to extract a vegan message in literature, art. But what was it like? So first of all, like, how did you come about that story, and what was it about that story that really struck out to you? And was it, and just to follow up on that, was it at the end of the story that you were like, oh, like then you really started to connect the dots and from your perspective kind of draw parallels to animal agriculture, or was it all throughout?
Yeah, so yeah, thanks for watching that video. And yeah, it was obviously a very disturbing and heartbreaking short story, right? And yeah, I came across it recently actually via We the Free. It was in a session for like volunteers and organizers and stuff, when we were learning about the book, and it was talking about I think about, how we rise up against injustice and how we sort of choose to be those sort of people in society who say no. So I came across it essentially through an animal rights lens. So it had always, right from the start, I thought I would be reading some kind of text anyway that had some kind of parallel with animal rights in some way. So it wasn't that I'd, read it at school or something and then just only realized now or something like that. But suffice to say, obviously the parallels are striking, right? I mean, it's not perfect, obviously. I mean, if it was us, we would liberate the boy or whatever from the underground basement or whatever it was. But I think it'd be helpful as well. Maybe we should tell the people listening actually what that short story is about, because I think most people won't have come across the book. Did you want to tell people about that, or should I?
Yeah, sure. I can, since I just read it. So it's basically this story about a utopia. Starts out as what appears to be a utopia, this sort of place called Omelas, where everybody is happy. Ironically, they're all preparing for this festival, and one of the things that the writer has honed in on is that there's going to be this horse race, So that was an interesting thing. But anyway, everyone is portrayed as very happy, including the horses that are preparing for this big festival. And the writer is sort of expressing, to the reader, you may be incredulous about this, like, do you believe me that there's this place? Well, let me tell you this further thing. So she's describing all this happiness. And then at some point she says, okay, let me tell you this one more thing. There's this basement that's locked. There's a young boy or a young girl, sort of, it's kind of unclear, who's about 10 years old, down in there with no light, living on gruel, essentially, is not let out and is just suffering down there. And weirdly, the people in the town all know about this. And every now and then they will go to visit this child to see their suffering. it's sort of unclear, but it's sort of expressed that the child's suffering is what drives that everyone's happiness depends upon this one child's suffering.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are disheartened to see it, and then they go on to accept it, and then eventually she gets to the point where she says, actually, there are some people who they don't go back to their life. They see the child and then they leave the town. They walk away.
Mm-hmm.
And watching your video, I watched your video before I had read the story, and you had sort of described those who walk away as being parallels to vegans,
Mm-hmm.
as like, we don't partake in this. But yeah, and I like how you brought up, yes, no one seems to have thought about liberating the boy. Although, well, people kind of think about it and they're like, yeah, but then everybody else is going to be unhappy. It's a strange story. I was curious. I knew I wanted to read that this morning, so I read that this morning, but I was also curious the tendencies of the writer. And the writer has written sort of a satirical essay about veganism. And it was sort of mocking vegans, honestly, which is
Really? I had no idea about this. That is,
yeah.
well, that just makes it even crazier that she wrote that.
Yeah, and it's sort of satirical, but it's sort of you can just, if you just Google the name of the writer and veganism, you'll be able to find this on her blog. It's essentially making a plants feel pain argument, and sort of
No
saying
way.
that they're like, you're hypocritical unless you choose to die. It's meant to be satire, but there's a lot of, you can sort of see in her understanding of things that she hasn't really thought as deeply about this as you would think from this story. So I don't think she intended this as a animal agriculture parallel, but perhaps she did, and perhaps she was wrestling with this. As I understand, she wrote this essay quite late in her life. And granted, veganism and the animal rights movement is, not so mainstream yet, and definitely wasn't back in, I think it was 92 or something when she wrote this. But
I think
yeah,
it was
anyway.
the 70s. Yeah, I think it's actually the 70s that she wrote it. And yeah, it's you don't get the impression anywhere throughout that the author is vegan at all, or that they meant for it to have a parallel to vegan. As most things we read that we see as having some kind of accidental vegan message, you can listen to Rage Against the Machine songs, for example, and you can hear like a vegan message in there. So there's lots of things that we read or that we watch, and that somehow has like a connection that we find as vegans. It's like, wow, I really feel this, even though it wasn't the author's or the filmmaker's intention at all.
Yeah, yeah. Which is, brings me to this point. I don't know how much we want to explore this, but I'm just sort of curious your take on, obviously this is a smart thinking individual, the person who wrote this, and what I meant was she wrote this essay about veganism in something like 92, I think.
Oh,
But
sorry, yeah.
but so obviously a smart person, but has not really thought very deeply about this. What do you think of people like Cosmic Skeptic? I know you and Natalie started to talk a little bit about Ali Tabrizi, although she was in the process of making her video at that point. But obviously smart people who come to like, let's just be blunt, a pretty dumb conclusion. Like, why is where since you're a pretty articulate guy, I'm having trouble articulating myself this morning. How do you grapple with that? How do you explain that, if you can?
Well, I don't think it's something any articulate person can explain. I think we're all as clueless as each other as to how the hell this happens. How can someone like Alex O'Connor, who's an Oxford graduate and has made all these extremely smart philosophical vids and came to veganism on his own accord because it all made sense to him and there was no logical argument against it? How can someone like that then just use essentially the dumbest arguments one day to and well, I say that maybe quite flippantly. He hasn't said ultimately the dumbest arguments. There are dumber ones. He could have gone with plants feel pain or something like that. With him, it was health. Then with Ali, he's talking about kind of like harm reduction and sort of like certain costs of items. It was all quite strange, and he's making something that's so simple sound very hard ultimately.
Yeah.
I think maybe, look, with anyone who's an ex-vegan, the point is they were never vegan to begin with, in my opinion. I don't think their heart was truly in it. They just didn't get it. I think they were kind of driven into veganism quite softly. There was something, they found some kind of connection and they just thought, oh yeah, this seems like a cool and logical and consistent thing to do. But they didn't really feel it like we feel it. They didn't really live it like we live it. And I think with a lot of, I'm not saying this is true of Cosmic Skeptic or Ali. I don't think actually this bit I'm about to say is true of either of them. But one of the biggest things that I think I noticed with activist ex-vegans is narcissism. I honestly think that a lot of people, and it's annoying because this actually gives credit to one anti-vegan argument,
Right.
but I believe I believe it is partly true when anti-vegans say something like, oh, vegans just go vegan to feel superior to others. Now, of me and you, that's not true. But of ex-vegans, I think it actually is. I genuinely think there is a small contingent of people who go vegan, who are animal rights activists, who do all the liberations, who go to like outreach demos, who you think, damn, this guy's solid. And the only reason that they went vegan is to say, I want to be part of a minority who's better than everyone else on Earth. What's everyone on Earth doing? They're murdering animals. I'm not. So I'm better than everyone now. And I think that's
Yeah.
the reason.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ali basically admitted to that, in saying that, sort of, as Natalie pointed out in her video, that he was sort of extrapolating from his experience and putting it onto all the other animal rights activists, this feeling of moral superiority, which I obviously believe that it is morally superior to not consume animals. That, however, that doesn't mean that I believe that I'm morally superior to another person, in every respect. Yeah, it's sort of a head scratcher. I've been lucky. I've been vegan 7 years and been in the movement as long. I'm lucky that I have not known someone to go ex-vegan after being an activist, because it would explode my brain. Honest, I just wouldn't know even what to say to that person. And someone like Ali, who's made a great documentary, which I will still recommend. I mean, it's a great film, and it's just odd now that you would recommend a film now to someone and they may deep dive into it and find, oh, this the creator actually went ex-vegan. It's not great.
It's not, is it? And the thing is that Ali's got a platform as the director of Seaspiracy, and now he's putting out this like dangerous idea to people that it kind of doesn't matter if you're vegan or not. And what's crazier is he actually says in the video, I've been putting out a dangerous idea. I feel guilty that I've been spreading a dangerous idea. And he's talking about actually being vegan and how being vegan is better than not being vegan.
Yeah.
So he's completely assigned the the dangerous idea to the wrong idea. The dangerous idea, Ali, is the one you're spreading right now, not the one that you were spreading. How are we going to create? How are animals ever going to be free? How are we going to live in a world without animal exploitation if we just have people with a platform like yourself saying, yeah, there's no point in buying this if it costs a little more than this, just buy this, and essentially playing into that stupid privilege argument that we get from non-vegans all the time, as if you have to buy a pack of marshmallows anyway. You could just go with, you could make your own marshmallows at home. You could just not have marshmallows. I mean, right, God. I mean, you and I both know Jeremy, vegans living in developing third world countries who don't have any of these things. They don't have a vegan marshmallows. A lot of people don't even know what a marshmallow is, let alone a vegan marshmallow. There's probably most countries in the world is like, what's a marshmallow? And there's vegans in those countries. So it just absolutely, which is crazy, because that video then just reeks of kind of privilege from Ali, because he's accusing us of being the ones who are looking down on people and being these privileged kind of elites. That's him. I mean, he's acting like this fussy first world princess when there's people out there. There's vegans in Pakistan, the Congo. There's vegans in Ukraine, which is getting bombed the shit out of at the moment. There's vegans in Palestine, which is getting bombed the shit out of at the moment. So how come he's talking about marshmallows and then us saying, I mean, it's mind blowing.
Well, and not only that, but in his story, which, by the way, there's just so many ways to poke holes in his dumb story about having to drive 30 minutes to go get some marshmallows. For one, he had access to the vegan marshmallows. He was 30 minutes away from a vegan marshmallow. He went and got them. Now, had he just planned in advance and said, you know what, like, I'm going to be doing some camping, might as well stock up on some vegan marshmallows. They're not right near me. So I do that all the time. Like for instance, and talk about first world stuff. I know that's how this is going to sound, but I really like the Reese's plant-based cups, but they only sell them at a Target. I don't like going into Target. So when I go into Target, I buy up all the Reese's. Right. I got like 8 bags.
So you don't have to return. Nice. Yeah, good idea. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with liking being in the first world and being aware of that privilege we have. It's great. We are privileged to be in the first world. We absolutely are. But it's how you go about that privilege. I acknowledge that privilege, and therefore I know that I sound like a diva if I'm going to say, oh, woe is me, I had to go out of my way to get the vegan marshmallows. What's the point in veganism?
Yeah. Well, I haven't structured this interview very well because I did want to talk about the short story, but maybe we'll swing back around to it, because I do think this is a good segue to get into sort of something that you started to explore with Natalie, which was, this idea of individual change versus systemic change. And I wonder your opinion. I think I know your opinion already, but I'll let you, share a bit about it. That, I've worked with many people now who are sort of against spreading a vegan message. Vegans, and I have found that baffling. And I sometimes think, are these people actually vegan themselves? Kind of similar to like an Ali, like they may be practicing veganism at the moment, but so anyway, it's sort of this thing that I was surprised to encounter in some of the groups that I've worked with, that there are a significant number of people who are kind of downplay the significance of someone taking personal responsibility for what they do in their day-to-day, and also encouraging others to do the same. I found that frustrating. I'm sure you have too, but what's your take on that? Like, have you encountered a lot of that, and what do you think should be done about it, honestly?
I haven't encountered a huge amount of it. I think pretty much every vegan I know says that, or the vast majority of vegans I know do believe individual change is something worth pursuing, and is something that we should do. They would say it's no excuse to like not be vegan, but just like, have the government enact stuff. But at the same time, I do know plenty of vegans who would say that maybe system change is better to focus on than individual change. So it's like, look, we should be vegan ourselves and actually live that. However, we shouldn't get our knickers in a twist, as we say in the UK, over, someone who wants to join the movement, the animal rights movement, who, like Ali, buys the non-vegan marshmallows from time to time, or something like that. In fact, I should have pointed that out to Natalie. Actually, that would have been an interesting question to pose her. I could have said, look, if you're working for pro-animal future, and you guys aren't even a vegan organization, and you're promoting system change and not individual change. I could have said to her, like, what is your problem with Ali Tabrizi then?
Fair point. Fair point.
Yeah, that could have been a good question to ask her, given she made a video about it. And I think maybe the fact that Natalie made a video about it, despite her perhaps believing system change is such an important thing to focus on, that does show that she still is passionate about individual change, despite that. So I guess that's the deal with most of the vegans I know. It's kind of mixed. And yeah, for me personally, ultimately, the only way things are going to change is if the population actually agrees with something. Politicians only enact something. They enact whatever's popular to stay in, right? So to me, the idea of just system change alone makes no sense. If the population wasn't vegan or didn't want to be vegan, but then Donald Trump hypothetically said, tomorrow we are mandating veganism, we'll have no more animal products. I mean, there would be uprisings, there would be violent uprisings across the country. So he wouldn't enact something like that, even if hypothetically Trump was vegan. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard is a vegan. She's in the cabinet. She's not going to enact any law like that because she just can't. Like, she can't do it. So that's where I'm at with it. It's like, yeah, okay, we'll change the system once people actually want to change.
Yeah, well, and I think those, the two examples of the interviews you've recently had with Wayne and Natalie are two of those people who I think are very passionate about veganism and focus more of their attention, as you said, focus more of their attention on, working on the system. However, I mean, I know people who have talked to Wayne turned vegan because, they were like vegetarian at the time, and Wayne had a talk with them about the dairy industry. And so, that may have been Wayne in the past or something. These are great discussions that you've been having. I really appreciate your measured approach to things that you disagree with. I also enjoy your debates. I see you as sort of like a joyful debater. Like, you seem to really enjoy it. You smile a lot. You have fun with it. I watched the one you alluded to. I believe it was the Name the Trait one very recently with that guy who, by the way, I learned a lot from that. I learned if you use the English language, you're enabling slaughterhouses because,
yeah,
by
that
the
guy
way,
was nuts.
He was, and you stuck with it for a good while. You gave it a good hour, at least. Yeah. So you've definitely honed your craft over the years, I would say. You use the name the trait argument very effectively, I would say. When that person plays, is allowing you to, like, some people like that guy just completely dodge it. And you've been an activist, I guess, like a decade. You spent a lot of time debating with people, and what have you sort of learned over that time has been sort of the best approach for you, and things that you've learned and try to correct mistakes from your past, and what do you think about that?
Yeah, so from street outreach, it's hard to actually know because I think it varies so much depending on the person. And with street outreach, you're not actually having a debate as such. You're if anything, trying to avoid debates. The last thing I want when I go out onto the streets is to end up in a debate with the person I'm talking to. I'm crossing my fingers every conversation. Like, we do the 3-minute movie challenge with We the Free right here in Bristol. That's what I'm mainly doing street activism wise at the moment. And, every time someone watches the 3-minute movie and then I've got to talk to them at the outreach, I'm crossing my fingers saying, I hope this person is reasonable and I can just talk to them about what they've watched and they're just going to agree. I don't want to have debates on the street. That's not what I'm there for. That just annoys me and frustrates me. So it's hard to kind of gauge how well that you've done on the streets when you're talking to people. We do have this amazing thing, MyStats, www.mystats.wtf, where you can actually track your impact. So that is partly useful. So you give them the card and then you say, yeah, go to this website and type in this code, and you write on your own little code on the card. So then when you go home that night after the demo, you can actually see how many people have visited the website because of you, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But the annoying thing is, Jeremy, most of the time they don't go on it. So I don't really know. Am I doing that well on street outreach? Probably not. Like, that's the annoying thing. Even someone as like experienced as me, who I'd like to think is good and knows. I mean, here's what I've learned then in that case. The ball is always in the person's court. You can't make someone go vegan. You just have to be a messenger. They watch the footage. You can just say a few things to them, but then the ball is in their court. You can't be too hard on yourself and say, I didn't convince this person to go vegan, because technically people don't convince us to go vegan. We convince ourselves to go vegan. We hear someone say something. There's other people saying other things. There's non-vegans saying the opposite. And we weigh up the arguments ourselves and we choose ourselves. So that'd be, I guess, one thing I'd learned from street outreach, is that you personally can't really change people. There's just little things that you can say that can hopefully gently nudge them in the right direction. As far as debates go, where you're actually, like online debates and stuff like that, where you're actually trying to beat the other person, you're not necessarily trying to turn them vegan, as it were. You're trying to show a logical contradiction in their argument that you hope will make them go vegan afterwards, but let's face it, they don't. With that, it's all about logical consistency. So I think Name the Trait is the best tool for that, because I think it's just the perfect vegan question. I mean, all the people that you debate online are absolutely repulsed with the very arguments they would use for massacring animals being used on humans. So it's great. I mean, these people that you're debating, they do think it would be wrong to murder a mentally disabled person because they have the IQ of a chicken. They do think it would be wrong to, hit a child because we're stronger than them and we're the top of the chain. They do think it would be wrong to enslave someone else because that's the way the world works, and they haven't built civilizations like we have throughout history, which was the arguments the slave traders used. They think all these things are like repulsive arguments, but then they use them on animals. So then you just trait equalize them with the human and you see if the argument still holds up. And there's no way for them to answer it consistently without hopefully realizing that they have very, very bad arguments for oppressing animals, because they simply would not use these arguments for a trait equalized human.
Yeah, essentially all they can do is like filibuster and dodge and try to change the subject like that guy did in your recent debate. So, I've seen a lot of people, myself included, evaluate over time what's most effective. I've seen people who were cube organizers to kind of look at that and say, what was I doing all that time? Did I really accomplish much? Looking back at your channel, it looks like the earliest videos that I could find, I don't know if they're your earliest videos, but it looks like 6 years or so. And it looks like cube style activism. So having this sort of tool that you have with We the Free, and having trouble, understanding what are my stats, that sort of thing. What have you found to be your best use of time? And, in terms of what is the biggest impact that you can make?
So annoyingly, the biggest impact I can make, I would say, would be to be actually on non-vegans shows advocating to a large non-vegan audience. Because the most effective piece of activism I ever did was on David Nino Rodriguez's channel. I've never done something before where I've spoken to non-vegans and I've just seen comment after comment saying, wow, I'm going to change. This has made me change. Just because I was on there speaking about stuff and showing them the truth. That doesn't really happen in other scenarios. So that is, I think, what would be the best use of my time. The problem is Joe Rogan going to get me on his podcast? Hopefully one day, but not anytime soon, I don't think. Are there many non-vegans with a big audience who would get me on? Again, there might be a few. So it'd be good if I could seek out those people and maybe go and advocate to their audience. But yeah, what I find with like street outreach and stuff like that, it is effective, I think, but you don't necessarily know. Let's say you speak to 20 people that day. Again, as I say, most people don't go on the link when I give them the card at the end of the conversation, even if it's been a really good conversation and they're like, yeah, wow, that sounds amazing, and I'll do this. And so I think you have to, it's a numbers game. You have to advocate to such a large group of people at the same time in order to make change. And I guess that's very hard for us as vegans to do, because echo chamber society on the internet, right? These podcasters, these big name non-vegan podcasters, they're generally going to get on people who align with them on a lot of stuff, and they rarely get on a vegan to talk about animal rights.
Yeah, I mean, I'm finding that this channel is pretty new. I've had it for about a year, and of course, I've really mainly just talked to animal rights activists. So obviously, that's who it's going to reach. But there's just been very little attention to my channel from non-vegans. Very few. You know, and I see, one of the ways that you have been very effective is sort of just critiquing the movement. Critiquing the political, sort of the ways that people use politics in our movement. That you've been very effective. I know the podcast that you're talking about, or the interview that you did was like a conservative one, and so it's interesting because you call yourself centrist, but because I guess our movement is so far to the left, you seem like a right winger, definitely when you. So yeah, you've been very effective, I think, at being able to, I hate to say it, reach across the aisle, but in a way, as you were talking about with Natalie, with Wayne, and all these people, we are sort of like positioned on the left. That is unfortunate, by the way. I agree with you that I think that this is not a political issue. I would like it to be in political spaces, but I don't think it should be tethered to the left or the right. Actually, that reminds me of a really interesting debate you had, I think, with Ronnie Lee about that. Which, by the way, that's really cool. I mean, even just to talk to Ronnie Lee, like, what a legend. But interestingly, I thought his take on that was quite poor, which just goes to show. I mean, it really was sort of limiting. I mean, why would you want to exclude like half the population, or potentially even more than half the population, if you include centrists? Which I would imagine most people are.
And then when you get on a global scale, it's even worse. So in the US, it's half the population, but then most of the world is what we would call in the West right wing, right? So, in the West, we have this little kind of woke bubble where everything's like the rest of the world. Just to be honest, they look at us and they just think we're crazy, right? They see these videos of American college campus kids, who believe in like infinite genders, or who say that white people are like evil and oppressive and I hate my own country, or who believe in whatever it is, or a woman's baby they're carrying is a parasite, or whatever it is. Now, to most people outside of the West, that's just going to look insane, all this stuff that people are saying. And these are debates that we do have within our own societies, and there are many people who are watching now, right, who might believe gender is a spectrum, or a pro-choice, or whatever it is. All right, fine. But we have to understand that to most of the world, these things that we're even debating amongst ourselves in the West, they're just seen as like these ridiculous far left, like woke issues, even to what people, I don't know, in Saudi Arabia, people in Saudi Arabia who would identify as on the left, they are, by our standards, extremely, extremely far right fascist, right? And these are like people on the quote unquote left outside of the West. So when you actually put it on a global scale, the movement now gets even smaller, because now we have this movement. Oh, to be part of the vegan movement, you have to believe that abortion is good, and you have to believe that there are more than two genders, and you have to believe that blah blah blah, whatever it is. And okay, the average person who lives in Chad or Burkina Faso or wherever it is, how are they going to ever go vegan if they think that in order to be vegan, you have to have these views that are largely just held by kids on like college campuses in like the States, in the UK, in Belgium, in places like this. So this is even more of a reason, in my opinion, to totally decouple animal rights from the left, because as you say, it's cutting out half the population of the US. Okay, great. It's now cutting out like 99% of the population if you actually look at the whole world.
Yeah. Well, and as I think you explained to Natalie, like it doesn't mean, as Natalie had at one point put it, like getting people on the left to stop believing in veganism. Obviously, that's not the point. Yeah. Do you see? I started to see like a tendency more on the right now to engage in these debates. I don't want to draw too big a conclusion from a few debates I've seen that Charlie Kirk has had with people who just stood up on his, college campus tours or whatever. But it was interesting that a couple of the guys who got up to speak to him about veganism, recently the guy who, Michael Bilotek, I believe, said, I agree with you on just about everything.
Right.
Other than this, do you see that as a trend? Because I'm hoping that that's a trend, or are these just kind of one-offs that aren't, that there isn't like this broader sort of shift that could be happening?
Yeah, well, it's hard to say. Look, I think there are a lot of right-wing people out there who do have a lot of empathy for animals, but the message just hasn't been advocated to them properly. They've just been in these echo chambers all their life. Like in the States, so I know that there's this big, especially religious divide with the left and the right. People on the left in the States tend to be pretty secular or atheist. People on the right are pretty much all, hugely Christian in the States, which is different from the UK. Christianity isn't taken seriously in the UK. In the States, that I know that if someone is right wing, there's probably about an 8 or a 9 in 10 chance that that person's a Christian, right? And so they've been told just all their lives that, God says, it's the ultimate authority. You can't argue with it. God says it's okay to eat meat. You just can't argue with the Bible, kind of thing. But I think if the message was actually advocated to a lot of people on the right properly, including Christians, and you can use documentaries like Seaspiracy to relate to them, I think if we actually started advocating our message properly to people on the right and not treating them like pariahs and just saying you're welcome in the movement. And by the way, you can be Christian and vegan. I mean, look at Jesus, for example, and look at the Garden of Eden. I think if we actually start advocating properly to people on the right, which is what I've been trying to do in this movement for so long now, then we'll get much more people come into this movement on the right. It's just a shame that there's so many idiots in our own movement, as you say, who want to keep the movement seemingly as small as possible. You're not going to take these people away from their guns or their religion or their pro-life stance or whatever it is. Like, you're not going to be able to debate with most people on the right about that. They're just going to probably stay with those opinions most likely for the rest of their lives, because they're very hard set on those opinions. And a lot of the times, I think me and Natalie even mentioned this on our podcast, leftists actually don't even beat them in debates on these things. Natalie herself, even, who's on the left, she even mentioned with the abortion debates, a lot of leftists who go into these debates with right wingers on the pro-life, pro-choice debate, they tend to not even know what they're getting themselves into, and they get just flustered by actually some very simple arguments coming from pro-lifers that they themselves aren't able to tackle because they live in echo chambers as well. There's a lot of echo chambers going on. So it's like, oh, damn, I've just heard this new argument that I've never heard before, probably because the only people I hang around with at my college campus are pro-choice. So I've never even spoke to a pro-lifer. But I think that's one of the big things that's happening as well. But look, as I say, if we advocate properly to the people on the right, then I see no reason why we can't actually have a much bigger movement.
Yeah. Well, some of the reasons why I think people get blindsided in arguments about, say, abortion or guns or you know, I've even seen people who have gotten railroaded in debates over whether the earth is flat. And one of the reasons why that is because, in my view, is that if you just take for granted that the earth is round, you just accept the scientific consensus, you're not looking into it. And the people who believe that it's flat have done all this like
yeah.
dive, so I think that may be sometimes what happens to people when they get into abortion debates. If they don't really engage with it a lot, like they're not going to know the facts, and then you're going to get really made to look stupid. I'll share. So I told you, like, I consider myself to be on the left. Always have, always, probably always will. There are times in this movement that I feel more like a right winger compared to some of the people in the movement. But I feel like that's sort of a bastardization of it, because to me, I don't think they're being what I consider to be the left, which by the way is a pretty nebulous term. It could mean a lot of different things. But I'll share this with you. And I think it was very interesting that you brought up how actually the left has more arguments against veganism, to Natalie. And I'll share that one of the first things that I did when I went vegan and saw Earthlings was to go on Daily Kos's blog, which is this liberal blog. It was a very prominent liberal blog, and just post like Dominion, I think, and say, you guys watch this film. And I mean, the hate, the cope, in the comment section was just unbelievable. And so, I'm sure like everybody deals with this, whether you're on the right or the left, but I had like this real disenchantment with people. I thought, these are compassionate people. I thought they were people who cared. A lot of them don't. And I will say this for Ali Tabrizi's, the one point he accidentally made correct, which I think he was wrong about this when he said like that vegans tend to not give to animal charities because they feel they're doing enough. That's bullshit. But what I have experienced is that people on the left in my tribe or whatever do feel they are doing enough, which is why they react very negatively towards veganism, because all of a sudden they feel like the bad guy. All their life they feel like the good guy. I care about Black people. I care about, immigrants, all this, because I can virtue signal on social media requires nothing of me, it's been disillusioning for sure.
Yeah, and I actually did a video that kind of plays into this. That's called something like "Why Woke People Hate a White Male Vegan," and what's kind of happening is, like you say, it kind of plays into this. Unlike these US college campuses, which, face it, now are just like clown colleges, like they're just political indoctrination camps. They're not even being properly educated in many cases. I'll even tell you, won't believe, I'll tell you a story in a second about an American friend I have who went to and you will find this ridiculous, even though you're on the left yourself. You'll just be like, what the fuck is this? But what's happening is they're kind of just been taught as fact that a white man is always more oppressive than you are. It's identity politics, right? Kids on these college campuses. So, if you are a Black or brown person in this room with your Black and brown friends, and there's a white man there, he is just by default the oppressor. He has more oppressive views than you do, and you're the more virtuous and kind of person. The white person will just be a bigot and an oppressor because he's a white male, and by birth he's racist, right? Original sin. So the minute then that white male says to those people, Jeremy, oh, by the way, I'm vegan, I'm against animal oppression, that's suddenly the cognitive dissonance hits. Hang on, there's this white male in the room who is, I have all these views. So I'm pro-choice, I'm anti-gun, I'm pro-immigration, I'm pro-BLM, so I'm like super woke and like anti-oppressive. Oh shit, but I eat animals, and this white guy doesn't. So then they get really defensive and they start. So now I've got to shoot the messenger. Now I've got to ensure that this guy's oppressive again. Colonizer, you're stopping indigenous people from engaging in their pastimes. So they then shoot the messenger to try to make themselves the non-oppressor again. And basically any good thing a white guy does it has to have some kind of bad motive to these people, because otherwise it destroys their narrative that they're being taught at these clown colleges, that you are always less oppressive than the white man. And I'll tell you this story, Jeremy, about this is just what a state US colleges are in, and why people might think I'm a little bit obsessed with US colleges, the amount I mention them on podcasts, but I just want to tell people how bad they are and what kind of social engineering they're running here. Because I don't think, this is why it's crazy when, this is what I said to Wayne, people keep asking stuff like, how did Trump win? Who would vote for Trump? How can this happen? I'll tell you why Trump won now, Jeremy. This is why Trump won, okay? So I have a friend, he tried to enroll in a US university recently. He ended up getting pulled out of this course by his dad because it was just so bad. So when they're signing up to do their course, it was in the first week of the first opening semester, whatever. And they have to fill in this little online survey about demographics and like some little additional modules for the course they're taking, whatever. He fills out this questionnaire for his course. And then afterwards, Jeremy, he gets this email come through to his inbox. Dear so-and-so, we noticed you are white and male. Please take this additional course about being mindful of your privilege around other students. It's fucking identity politics, social engineering, teaching these young, impressionable kids white people are oppressive and they have privilege and they're bad. And if you are black or brown, you are, and this has been seeping like a cancer across so many US universities. There was even one recently where they found out that you had to inform your campus if you were, or your dorm or something, if you were bringing a white person on site. So there was like this campus dorm, and say you have a white friend. Oh, I'm bringing my friend Jeremy round. Oh, cool. Yeah. Oh, he's white. You have to make sure you inform the faculty about this. So students can be. It's unbelievable.
Well, so I actually struggle to believe that this is widespread. Now, maybe you're right, because that just sounds so cartoonish to me that I can't. It's hard for me to believe. I will say, I was in college in the UNC, University of North Carolina system, and this was 2 decades ago. That was not my experience. Now, that was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I didn't have anything like that. So. I'm wondering, I'm wondering if these are isolated cases that are extreme. I do think that there may be a bit of a overreaction to some of the like DEI has like become like one of the main talking points on the right lately. I wonder if there's some overreaction now. Maybe it's granted, maybe it's warranted, but I guess I have a little bit of skepticism as to whether or not how widespread what you're talking about is. But maybe better. Again, this is the kind of thing that you're paying attention more to than I am. I actually kind of, I don't want to say I don't care, because I do care. But it just hasn't been like something that I've really paid that close of attention to. I pay attention to like national politics and things like that come election time. Lately, I used to be working for NPR back in the day for like a little over, about 15 years. And so I was very well informed at that time, at least in my opinion, although as I make this point very many times, I didn't know the first thing about animal agriculture. We never reported on that, didn't know about that. And I find that extreme failure.
Yeah.
So, maybe I wasn't that well informed, but I was at least, understanding what was going on in state politics and largely national politics, that sort of thing. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe things have just gotten really bad and I'm just not aware of it.
Yeah, it's bad enough in the UK. I've spoken to a few young people here at university, and their experience of university, just like yours, is completely. So mine and your experience is completely different from how things are these days. So you would agree, I'm sure, Jeremy, when you were back when you were at university, if you're at like a party or something, you're having some drinks with some friends, you could just have debates about stuff and have civil disagreements about stuff. You could talk about, I don't know, Israel, Palestine or something like that. And there might be someone here, oh, but this and this. And, you know, the other person might say, oh, this and that. My friend in the vegan movement who's at uni in the UK at the moment, she was telling me like, no, everyone just has the same opinion on everything. You have to tick every box. If you say the wrong opinion, if you step out of line on their little checklist of opinions you have to hold, you're seen as like the Nazi, the bigot. You're made like a pariah out of in front of like your whole course, your whole classroom thinks you're this like evil person. So, and I had another guy in the UK at university actually told me as well recently. He just said, yeah, he agrees with me about so many things, but he just kept like everything to himself. And he was at one of the one of the top UK universities as well. And even he would, you'd think where public discourse is like really, you know, you'd think it's this big thing where you challenge each other's ideas. You know, it was never a problem for me or you, Jeremy, when we're at university, that you challenge other students' ideas and that you have different opinions from your friends about stuff. Now it's even the case that these huge Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, these huge, like what you guys call Ivy League universities in the States, the students come out of there with the same opinions on everything: abortion, Israel, Palestine, gun control, immigration, gender. It's social engineering now going on at these campuses. And they even found, I think it's something like 28 out of 30 professors in the United States are leftists. Now, I'm not saying there would be anything wrong with that if that wasn't seeping into their course. The idea of the lecturers are meant to remain impartial, by the way. That was always the case when we were at university. Our own lecturers wouldn't even add us like on social media. They said, look, we'll add you once you all graduate and stuff. That's when we can become more personal. But right now, when we're on the course, everyone, we have to be very impartial about our ideas and our beliefs. We can't really inform you about, you know, what we believe about X kind of thing. But now, do you get the impression that college tutors even are just like, you know, oh, I'm sorry to all the black and brown students today that Trump won. And, you know, we like, this is what the kind of shit that's happening.
Yeah, well, I definitely see that in the vegan movement. I can't speak to it in my college experience. You know, college was meant to be a place where you go and you leave home and you explore different ideas and you get exposed to different ideas. I always had the tendency, and maybe this was me being a bit condescending, but I always thought that if you went off to college and you got sort of educated, it opened your mind to things like, seeing like, different sexualities as people that are equal to me, because like maybe you grew up in a town where you didn't know anybody, everybody who was gay or something was in the closet at that point, and we're in college. I always thought that some of the leftward leanings of like people coming out of college would be a natural phenomenon. And I assume that may be the case in some cases, but things like Israel, Palestine to me are a little more nuanced. So if everybody's coming out of like,
how dare you? Sorry.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that is one of those things that has, I mean, I having been in the movement now for like 6-7 years at this point, I've seen it, getting split apart numerous times. I don't think I've seen one as destructive as this, including BLM. Now, maybe I just wasn't paying as much attention during BLM, but I just see this as just massively destructive. I mean, I'm seeing it like every day where, it's just being injected. Okay. Like Israel, Palestine's being injected into a lot of things that have nothing to do with it. And I'm also just seeing just groups like isolate themselves, tear themselves apart over this issue. And it's kind of sad to see to me. To me, it's also sort of exposing the people's priorities though, because I'm seeing that a lot of the people who are, hyper focused on it aren't really hyper focused on animals. And I say that, realizing we haven't spoken a lot about animals, but that's the problem, because the what happens is, we get kind of diverted into these different sort of things, like everything, all these issues are important, but in my view, and I have been criticized for this, which blows my mind, that I have wanted to stay focused on the animals, and even not having an opinion. So even having the wrong opinion might be wrong. Sometimes having no opinion was wrong, or just saying I don't, it's not my place to say this or something.
So this is another thing that I think has changed greatly over the years. If you even just say, I want to actually learn more about this to even form an opinion, or if you just say, look, I want to stay out of this, now the idea is, if you say that, you are now shamed as the other. You are now against me for just wanting to stay out of it. You are now the genocider if you just don't really take an interest in the history of the Israel-Palestine conflict, because they guilt people into this with this saying that if you're neutral in times of injustice, you've taken the side of the oppressor. Now, there's a certain truth to that, right? If you actually know who the fucking oppressor is. If you don't know who the oppressor is, if you haven't read all the books, and if you don't want to just confidently assert the wrong opinion, i.e. the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is what's happening, by the way, with a lot of people in the intersectional crowd, then you're automatically seen as the pariah, just for having the sensible opinion of, say, oh, this is really not my field, or, oh, this isn't like an interest of mine. I'm focused on animal rights, but, maybe this is something that I'll look more into another time, whatever. They really demonize anything like that. And it's impossible to have an opinion on every single injustice happening in the world. Like, if I was to say to the average intersectional, oh, okay, whose side are you on then in the ongoing civil war in the Central African Republic? What sides are there in the ongoing war in the Central African War? There you go. That's an injustice that's going on you don't know about. I'm not going to shame you and go, you're now a genocider because you don't know which side you're on in the ongoing civil war in the Central African Republic.
Yeah.
What a ridiculous assertion that would be. Yet that's what they do about all these issues, that they just want to choose as this thing and inject it into the movement as the current thing, which is why I hate this. This is why when I say woke, it's a pejorative, right? But when they say woke or intersectional, what it's meant to mean is being aware of all injustices and how different oppressions and stuff, overlap and all this kind of stuff. But what it's more tended, I think, to mean in the movement, and I'm sure you'll agree with this is not being aware of multiple things. It's about actually choosing one thing, whatever the current thing is being pushed by the mainstream media, and then making veganism about that issue. Because if it was actually about being aware of all injustices, like they keep saying it is, then they'll be pushing all these different things into the animal rights movement. They'll be talking about stuff going on in Nigeria and the Central African Republic and Kuwait and all these other countries. But they don't. They just pick whatever the current thing is being pushed by BBC News, CNN, Fox News.
Well, and interestingly, we're talking about like a conflict that's getting a lot of attention. And you could argue that the Ukraine and Russia conflict has gotten quite a bit of attention as well. And but there aren't like these sort of mass calls for people to take a stand on Ukraine, Russia. And by the way, I mean, I don't want to paint everybody with like a single brush. I do think like some of the loudest voices are the ones that we're focusing on. But the problem is they aren't just a few. Like, it is more than just a few people who are pushing this. I just want to make it clear, though, that I'm not saying like everybody who believes a certain way is like doing this to the vegan movement, or that it's necessarily always wrong. Like, for instance, like people have the, like, as you're very much a free speech guy. I know that people do have the right to free speech. I think even to some extent the right to try and gatekeep the movement if they want to. Like, even that's a form of free speech, but it's alienating, and it's not winning them many friends, I think. And if it does, it's winning friends that are people who are going to have to subscribe to the groupthink and stay in line essentially. and not question things. And one of the real problems that we have is like people appealing to authority too much and not questioning things. And I don't understand. And I like that you put this, like, I think you said it to Wayne, like this, why you're not afraid to speak up and call out the things that you see in the vegan movement is just like being a vegan. I loved that answer, because you're already doing that as a vegan. You're already standing against, you know, the vast majority of society, and you're not doing it because you're Ali Tabrizi and you want to feel morally.
Yeah,
Ali,
no,
by the way, Ali, like, you're fair game, dude. Like, I've never met the guy before, but I'm not going soft on him.
Yeah, and it's exactly. It is a wonder that there's, you know, I get all the time people message me stuff saying, you know, like, oh, George, I kind of wish I could say the things that you say, but I just can't. Or, you know, oh, I wanted to like this post that you made about the intersectionals, but I don't even have the balls to like press the heart react on Instagram or whatever. And it's just like, yeah, dude, look, that's fine if you don't want to. I can't force you to like or share all of my posts or whatever. But at the same time, yeah, just like you've just alluded to, right? Already as a vegan, you're kind of sticking your neck above the parapet in some way. You're taking like an unpopular stance among society. You probably became the outcast of your family when you chose to go vegan, right? Yet within the actual vegan movement itself, you'll not choose to like go against the loud voices. Maybe it would help if like more of the kind of anti-woke people in the animal rights movement just saw the woke crowd who are trying to make veganism about all these things as akin to the meat industry, as akin to carnism. They're kind of this group that's actually trying to kind of dominate everyone into believing this one thing. And we're the ones who are speaking out against actually what is the true injustice.
Do you think this could be because, you know, when you take a stance as a vegan, you've already sort of limited your social circle. So if you're if you then further limit it, eventually you get down to I'm just sitting in my room alone. Is that, do you think that could be people's fear? I assume it is, but what do you think?
Yeah. Tinkerbell, stop that. So
Tinkerbell has an opinion about it as well.
She does, clearly. One second.
Yeah, no worries.
I think she was thinking there was someone at the door, but I don't think there is.
I see.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. I do think there's that fear of isolation, of loneliness. And ironically, I think that's even driven by the fact that so many of us who actually do hold the sensible opinions just don't speak up anyway. So it makes it feel even more isolated. It's like, oh, it's only George Martin and me who believe this. I can't say anything. When actually, if all of us in the movement spoke out and said, no, actually, I don't have to donate to BLM, or no, actually, I don't believe that there's 9,000 genders, or whatever it is that they're like kind of scared to say. There's actually just a normal, comfortable, safe, what would be a normal, comfortable, safe opinion without these people who are kind of trying to make it like it's the, you know, like you're some kind of evil person if you hold this opinion. Then ironically, obviously, they would realize that they're not alone in this. So I think part of the loneliness in this is the fact that they're just alone with their thoughts in this, and they're not actually seeing the other vegans who do hold the same opinions as them speak up against the bullies, because these people are bullies, Jeremy. They will try to destroy, they will try to cower people into silence. They will try to essentially destroy your career, your life, over having a difference of opinion about something that are generally just like opinions that just normal people hold. You know, oh my God, did you hear that so-and-so voted for Donald Trump? You mean the president of the United States, who tens of millions of people voted for, just normal people, your mum, your dad, your next door neighbor, the person who said good morning to you as they delivered your mail this morning. Like what they do. And this is why this is why I think the vegan movement as well, we're not doing ourselves any favors when it comes to not being seen as weird. They shame like these just normal beliefs, having the being pro-life, being pro-Second Amendment in the States, or whatever it is. They shame these just very normal opinions as being, you are now the weird, the outcast, you are the scumbag, you're like the evil degenerate in society, because you have this view, that actually most people in the country have anyway. So they're just trying to make the movement actually seem as weird and outlandish as possible to the average person.
Yeah, I'm thinking like I'm trying to think of examples of people in the States who kind of do what you do, and there aren't very many. Like maybe there's Gary Yourofsky, because I'm thinking like who's sort of like George. I think of Vegan Gains. I think of Avi, and Ask Yourself Who I Know. You even you called them out for their treatment of David Rams, which was very interesting, by the way. And honestly, I thought that was another example of someone who spoke up about something that maybe others were afraid to speak up about, because I found that whole situation, by the way, very sad. I found the whole situation with Ask Yourself and Lifting Vegan Logic sad. I just, because I like all these people. Now, all that said, we all don't have to be friends, obviously, but we are sort of a team in a way.
Yeah.
So the treatment of David Rams, I thought, was deplorable. I thought the treatment of Danny was deplorable as well.
Yeah.
And I also see Isaac just do, phenomenal discussions where he can be incredibly reasonable. So I don't understand that, but I was really glad that you had that discussion with Avi, which was very recent, to just sort of explore it a little bit. And I'm not throwing really shade. I have my opinion about it, but I do like Avi. I do like Isaac a lot. I think they bring a lot to the table, and I learn from them. We have a weird tendency in our movement. I don't know what it is, but whether it's like someone doesn't believe the right way on Palestine as you do, to just destroy, or somebody doesn't want to discuss culling carnivorous animals, destroy. Everybody's Satan because they don't. And to your point, essentially what David was doing in that was what I expressed earlier of like, I'm not really informed enough about this, which is essentially what he was saying. I'm not really informed. I haven't looked into this enough. He had made a video. He took it down, probably realized he stepped in it or something. I don't know. But it is unfortunate. But I'm really glad that someone has the balls to call it out. And like you said, it's just sort of a natural thing for you. It really shouldn't even be seen as like having the balls to do it. But I do think a lot of people are just kind of scared to speak up to some of the louder voices in the movement.
Yeah, I think because they are two extremely smart guys, Avi and Isaac. Let's face it, they might even be, I know it pains for me to say this because I don't like either of them. But it pains for me to say they might be the two smartest guys in the movement from a pure logic sense, right? I mean, it's hard to actually think of two guys smarter than them in the movement. So I think that's what makes them very intimidating to a lot of people, is that they don't even want to call out what is clearly wrong and bullying and unreasonable behavior that they've enacted on others. Just clearly unreasonable that 98% of vegans would look at and think, that is disgusting. You don't do that to people. But they won't say anything because they don't want to be the next target. They don't want to be the next person called a retard or whatever it is by those guys in their nerdy Discord server and get dogpiled and have the same thing happen to David Rams or whatever happened to them. So I think that's a lot. We talk about cults and stuff a lot. And I think I'm not necessarily saying that those guys are specifically a cult, but that is one of the ways in which kind of cults operate, is that they kind of silence people kind of through shame and fear into like believing the things that they believe or to not speaking out against them. So ultimately, I think a lot of the reason that, people don't speak out against this stuff in the movement is just because they're terrified to be the next one in line, because the way that these bullies do operate, it is scary to a lot of people. They will pick up on one dissenting voice and they say, let's make this person our next target.
Or make an example of them, like which I
Yeah.
feel like is kind of what happened with David Rams. Was like he was like, we're going to make an example of this guy so that other people, are sort of shamed into having this discussion. Which and by the way, the calling carnivore debate, when that first started to emerge as a thing, which was sort of like, I guess, like a couple of years back, 3 or 4 years ago, I guess, I found it outlandish. Now, I have since listened to the xenomorph argument, and I found I don't really have a good argument against that.
Right.
So in principle, so in principle, I sort of agree. Now, in practice, I'm not going around shooting animals. I won't do that. But I didn't have a good argument against it. But I thought at the time, and I'm going to guess, I should have asked it. I had David on. I should have asked him if he just found it to be kind of toxic for our movement. I just found at the time we're already up against it, talking to the public. Now we start bringing up, we're suggesting that we go and euthanize all the carnivores, and that, like, we're just going to look insane.
Yeah. Now, here's the other thing, though, Jeremy, and this is why they're so good at what they do with their kind of bullying tactics. You're right there in saying that it's bad optics for the movement to start talking about killing lions and stuff, right? But then what they'll do, Jeremy, if you were to say that to them, they would just make you feel stupid because you don't have the data to say that. What they would say, Avi would just be like, well, that's an empirical claim. And then he would ask you to provide data, Jeremy, for the fact that the public will not be receptive to vegan. And you don't have the data. So the thing is, they shame like common sense. And they make it like, well, no, how would you even know it's common sense? Have you done a survey of every single person in the United States and Canada about would you be more likely to go vegan or not? Blah, blah, blah. So they're very, very good at getting their message across, just by making also common sense things seem like this, like, oh, no, that's just you being anti-intellectual and clueless, and you're just making like this non-evidence-based claim kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I allow for the possibility that they could be right, like, and it could be the case that, and I had this conversation with Richard about it, that it is important to know what our values are, and that there is the danger that if someone confronts you with this, what would you do about carnivorous animals? If you didn't have a good answer for that, then you could end up looking silly. But I have seen them discuss that their goal really isn't, furthering, they're not being activists when they're having these debates. I saw Abby have that discussion post Joey Carbstrong's Tristan Tate debate, where he said, like, a lot of these activists, they're failing because they have this secondary goal, which is to further veganism, to promote veganism, whereas, that's not their focus in a debate. But, for Joey, it is for sure. I mean, he's an animal rights activist. And
I mean, that's worrying. I mean, if they say that, shouldn't it be the idea that if you've got Joey Carbstrong on Tristan Tate's channel, the idea is to advance veganism? And I also love just what clueless dorks Isaac and Avi are about this, because I saw them making fun of Joey for his appearance on that, and them just saying stuff about. They mentioned me as well, or Isaac did at least. I think he said, next he'll have George Martin on or something like that, as in the next idiot, to go on and do it wrong, when you need like a logical guy like me to be on there. And someone made the point to me, Jeremy, that they saw this comment that Isaac had made, and they just said, like, could you imagine what an absolute fucking dork Tristan or Andrew Tate would make Isaac and Avi look like if they were to go on that show? I know they bring this argument of, you just got to go on there, name the trait, and you'll be seen as this like logical king kind of thing. No, look, Andrew Tate, Tristan Tate, and their fans don't give a shit about that. They don't care about that. This is the thing. These guys, they don't understand the social stuff around this stuff. Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate don't care about some nerd going on their show and coming up with this insanely logical argument. That's not the kind of stuff they care about. They're going to say that the ultimate way to persuade their followers or whoever is more to do what Joey did, is try to kind of relate to him in some way. Now, obviously, it didn't work. Tristan was completely unaffected by what Joey did. But they can't just go in assuming, like Isaac and Avi, that their way of doing it would somehow work. It wouldn't. And I know it wouldn't work because I literally heard Andrew Tate recently taking the piss out of being logically consistent. This is Andrew Tate's worldview. He said something like, "Oh, you get these vegans who say stuff like, oh, you wouldn't eat a dog, but you'd eat a cow. You're inconsistent. You're a hypocrite." And he goes, "Yeah, you know why I can be a hypocrite? Because I can strangle you with my bare fucking hands. You're fucking gay." That's what he said. That's Andrew Tate's logic.
Yeah.
Isaac and Avi think they can fucking go on there and go, "What is it? It's true of a dog. It's true of a..." Fuck off.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they could have been, they could have some success in maybe reaching some members of the audience. Tristan Tate himself was, hopeless. And that's partly why Joey shifted tactics, obviously, like mid-stream of thought. He just realized, like, I don't care is going to be the response to everything that I say about this.
Right.
Yeah, it wasn't effective, but yeah, it was another one of those instances where we take this incident that, I guess we could call it, this discussion that happened that wasn't very effective, and just blast Joey. Now, I know there's been criticism of how Joey Carbstrong handled the Anonymous for the Voiceless situation too. I just don't know all those facts, but I do know regarding Joey Carbstrong that you can just see it in his day-to-day, how much he cares, how much he's trying, how much he works, how hard he works. And yeah, it's really hard to demonize someone that hardworking. They're not above it. People, are open to it should be okay to criticize people. But yeah, it's been kind of destructive to me also, just like kind of how much we bash Joey. Now, I also don't want to put Joey on a pedestal either, but I recognize, as someone who's been around people like Wayne Shung, who I consider probably the hardest working person that I've ever met. I see the similarities between him and Joey. It's just really hard to, even when I have criticisms, to demonize someone like that when they are just doing the work.
Yeah, of course. So no one is exempt from criticism in the movement about stuff. But at the same time, vegans tearing each other down, it is a real problem. The one thing I will say though, Jeremy, is I don't care as much when people quote unquote tear other vegans down or criticize other vegans when it's actually to do with animal issues, as in like, oh, this campaign they did sucks, or it was speciesist in some way, or this wasn't impactful for animals. As long as they do it in a non-toxic way, right? The criticism. But tearing other activists down, trying to cancel each other, cannibalizing our own movement, as Wayne Shung put it, over differences in irrelevant opinions, political opinions and stuff. I think that's the real problem. Like, imagine, like, for example, I think it would be a real shame. Let's take it with Joey Carbstrong, for example. If people were to cancel and shame Joey Carbstrong because of a position he holds about, I don't know, Israel-Palestine, for example. He's been very vocally pro-Palestine recently on his social media. Right. Now, if Israeli vegans just all said, like, cancel Joey Carbstrong over this, that would be a real shame. The funny thing is, though, Jeremy, they're not actually going to do that. The most that they'll just say is, I'm not following you anymore, or something. It's only kind of one side of the animal rights movement. It's only one side of the political spectrum who actively tries to say, don't platform this individual over this. So even the most ardent pro-Israeli vegan who thinks that it's deeply anti-Semitic to side against Israel in this ongoing thing, all they'll do is just say, I'm not following you anymore, Joey, you fucked up, you have this opinion. They won't write in to the next fucking animal rights event that Joey's speaking at and say, are you aware that you're platforming a bigot, Joey Armstrong? It's only one side that does this, which is, I think it's one of the things I actually mentioned to Wayne in the podcast, actually, is a lot of the people who do the cancelling and shaming, the issues that they're talking about in the movement are essentially non-existent. They're saying, we can't have someone who is right-wing at an animal rights march because that will make the POC unsafe because of racism or something. There's not been one incident in the animal rights movement in history where a right-wing person has turned up to a march and said, I don't want blacks here or something like that. It doesn't happen. It's a non-issue. That's never happened and probably never will. So the very thing that the only side where anything is coming from, they're basically creating arguments where there are none. And the only discrimination I've ever seen is people say, it's more likely to actually be one of these far left intersectionals who say, I don't want Israelis at the march. that's where the only discrimination that there is actually coming from.
But to be honest, that's all I've seen as well. Now, I should point out, I'm not outspoken about this, so I have seen several groups, say that they're getting deplatformed because of their pro-Palestine stance. I have not seen that. I have not experienced that. I've seen that, as you said, all from the other side. I've seen people, sort of say this isn't a welcome space for Zionists. I've seen, more comments like that. But, I just don't want to say that my experience is all that there is, but here, I'll give an example. This isn't about Israel, Palestine. This is more about back when AV got kind of disintegrated. Locally, without getting too specific, what happened in our local AV chapter was that a trans member of the group accused another person of making anti-trans comments. Now, I say this, take this with a grain of salt, because I'm saying all this second, third hand, like from people that I understand what happened. The person that they were talking about, who is a pretty prominent member of the animal rights movement, who allegedly made the comment, made a comment on their Facebook page that, to be honest, it's not something I would have said. I'll just say it that much, but it wasn't that bad. It was essentially about something like someone won a race and they said, gee, I wonder why. Okay.
Oh my God. Right.
And so that's that. And again, second hand, third hand, I don't know if this is exactly what happened. That's what I heard. So, but then the allegation became that this was, anti-trans stuff happening at cubes. This didn't happen at a cube. So, so our local group just kind of withered because the organizers had to deal with this. And there was an individual in the group who was individually messaging people to tell them basically leave the group.
A stunningly similar incident happened in the UK with another outreach group. I'm not going to say who it was or who the outreach group was, because I don't want to give too much air to this issue. But someone had simply made a comment online that they enjoyed a TV series that a comedian had made. They're just, this was a great series. It was genius. That exact thing happened, that a trans individual then submitted a complaint to the organization and said they are now the demos were unsafe for them as a trans person because this comedian may have comedians do what comedians do. They get up on joke and they get up on stage and they make jokes, right? They say offensive
Yeah, it's
things.
probably like Chappelle or somebody.
Right. That it was in that sort of ilk.
Yeah.
It was like someone like a Chappelle type comedian.
Right.
And so we had the exact same thing happen here. So it's like they're ultimately making mountains out of molehills. These are debates that we have elsewhere outside of our groups. We can have these discussions about, is it fair for Leah Thomas to swim the race or whatever it is. Just because someone has an opinion on that outside of their activism, that doesn't mean that this has now become an unsafe space for you, like at the demos or anything like that. These are just completely outside events. And for the record, there hasn't been any animal rights event where a person who says, I like this comedian, or I don't think Leah Thomas should be competing in the women's category. There's never been an incident at an animal rights event where they've said, oh, you're a trans woman, I don't want you here. That's literally never happened. And again, it probably never will. The only people who say, I don't want you here because you're a this, are the intersectional mob. No person who's anti-woke or anti-intersectional or right-wing or centrist or whatever, or even just centre-left, because let's face it, you're all racist to them anyway. None of them have been causing any of these issues at demos or making anyone feel unsafe or discriminating against anyone. If you meet just the average Trump voting vegan or the average vegan who likes Dave Chappelle or whoever it is, they're perfectly nice and respectful to everyone at demos, regardless of what their opinions are outside of these demos, outside of these marches. So I don't know what the agenda is here of trying to take these irrelevant issues from outside and say, well, it's this getting off on being a victim. A lot of these people are doing it for. They like the idea of, I was victimized by this. They get this dopamine hit from when they write that post on social media. I felt unsafe at the AV demo because Jeremy was in attendance and he said, he doesn't want to take a stance on Israel Palestine or whatever it is. Like they want those comments and those heart reacts to flood in and say, I'm so sorry, Katie or Emily or whatever the hell their name is. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Because for some reason they get this warm, fuzzy feeling of being a victim and have people care about their false victimhood.
Yeah. Or it could be even more insidious. It could be infiltration. I mean, I have no idea, but I mean, but what lends a little credence to the idea that it could be infiltration is you saying, yeah, I had this similar thing happen in this group over here. And, someone in New York says, oh yeah, that happened to our group. It's just like, it was very coordinated almost. Now, I don't necessarily know if that's the case. And I'm not saying that is the case, but it's just, and here's the thing too. I don't really like to dox myself or say where I live. I live in a place that is extremely pro-LGBT. Like you couldn't get more pro-LGBT. Now you're at a cube of animal rights activists who are caring about animals. Like, I couldn't think of a more pro-LGBT place than that. Like, I'm pro-LGBT, like everybody around me was, even the person who probably made the you could call it insensitive. I wouldn't have said it, but even they, are probably pro-LGBT. So it just blows my mind a little bit. It kind of goes back to the whole, like, what was college like for us decades ago? Well, like, I thought we were like all open-minded and we were like all cool and like we can just chill and like have debates and discuss things. And I will push back on one thing you said, that yes, you could have those kinds of debates, but what I would say is that they often got quite heated, like where people shy away from them. Now, maybe that's a good or bad thing, but it's extraordinary. Sorry, go ahead.
The fact that they even happened in the first place, though, is the point. Okay, you were at a party at your university, Jeremy, and maybe a conversation came up about gay adoption or gun control or immigration or whatever it is, and maybe those debates did get a bit heated, and maybe there was just the odd bit of fallout. the point is, at universities now, the debate at the party wouldn't even happen because no one would even dare express that they're pro-Israel or whatever it is, because you would just be made a pariah. So, to be honest, these parties now that they're probably having at university, they must be fucking boring, Jeremy. I don't know what they're talking about. What do? They all just stand in a room and agree with each other about everything? That sounds like one fucking boring party, dude.
Hey, like that would be, we were talking about that utopia, right? Like that would be one of those weird utopias that is actually a dystopia where everybody's just like, yes, I agree with that. That'd be a great short story.
In a cellar under the party, there is a transphobe locked there, just powering and
and someone like, in the story, someone like slightly thinks a thought, and all of a sudden the room goes silent, and they're like, no, sorry, I agree.
Oh my god. It's this whole. This is why there's a fantastic book, by the way, and by the way, I don't agree with the author on his every opinion. He doesn't align with my political beliefs in many ways. And he's now just got this. He wrote this book when he was actually sane. You know who Milo Yiannopoulos is?
Yeah.
Because he's gone nuts now. He's now gone super, super, super far right Christian nationalist and has renounced his homosexuality, said it was a choice, and believes in conversion therapy. He's just gone nuts, right? But back when he was sane, he wrote an excellent book called Dangerous, which talks about a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about on this podcast. And he said, if you were to go to the average English course on a college campus in the States or the UK or wherever, he said they probably don't let the students read 1984 anymore. They did when I was at university, by the way. I did English, and 1984 was one of the books on our course. And Milo said in this chapter in Dangerous, he said, they probably don't actually give out that book anymore about thought policing and so, because the students would probably be amazed that the book is talking about their own lecturer.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. I don't think I read 1984 till after I was in school. I can't remember. It probably was. I was not a great student. I probably was assigned it and didn't read. Milo was interesting. There's an example of someone, not to veer too off course, but I think, what ended up happening with Milo Yiannopoulos is kind of what happens to some people is where they start to get attention for being the voice of dissent. Like, here's this gay man who's, pro-Trump and, like all this, like, but didn't he get he got exposed for being a pedophile or something? And he finally canceled himself or got himself canceled, I guess. But
I can't remember. I think it was his book publisher. Maybe it was like Penguin or something. Basically, had to cut ties with him because he said, I don't even know what the comment was, but he made some kind of comment about he didn't see anything wrong with maybe super young age gap relationships that were maybe a little too young or something like that. I don't know exactly what it was. That was probably when he went nuts or started going nuts when he said that. But the book Dangerous is a fantastic read or listen. I've got it on Audible. It's written with such wit that I would suggest that everyone actually reads or listen to it, because it's a fantastic exploration of all the kind of crazy stuff that's just been going on in the past few years. And he makes so many very good observations. And as long as you separate yourself from the author, I think it's just a very good read.
Well, I'm going to ask you a dangerous question then, because I'm scared you're going to turn us all right wing, but I am curious, since we started with that short story, and you've told me about this book, I just always ask people like what they read, what are some of the books that they find inspiration from, and it could be animal rights topics, it could be stuff outside, just even you seem like a pretty well-read person, or someone who's at least interested in reading a lot. What are some of the things that you draw inspiration from?
So animal rights wise, I think my favorite book is Eternal Treblinka. That is an
Yeah.
absolute gold mine of not only great quotes and stuff, but also the links of historical oppressions and how they relate to animal oppression. Basically, the book builds the argument that human oppressions were inspired by what we do to animals. Every single human oppression that you can think of throughout history, it was modeled on animal oppression in some way. Animals were the first oppressed beings, they were the first slaves, and we modeled human slavery on animal slavery. They even talk in Seaspiracy actually about animals were the first traded goods, and that's where the term capitalism comes from. Cap is head. It was like a head count of cattle, and I think cattle, even the term, comes from capital.
Right.
And
stocks, stockyards. Yeah.
Livestock, right? Exactly, stock. And then, so then we even have the term for black slavery was chattel slavery. So it all stems from animals. So that is a great book that I'd recommend everyone read. Then as far as like political books go, Dangerous is obviously great. The Madness of Crowds by Douglas Murray as well, another like gay conservative. So that was also a great book. I think it starts off with the whole Evergreen scandal, whatever, where I think it was that Brett Weinstein got basically chased off the campus with baseball bats because he said it was wrong for like white teachers to, I can't remember, there was some kind of racial thing that they were enacting. Something for you to read about with the college campus stuff, Jeremy, because you were saying the stuff you haven't noticed it being widespread. So that's one for you to read, The Madness of Crowds by Douglas Murray. The Parasitic Mind by Gad Saad as well, Professor Gad Saad. That's a really, really good book. So I recommend people read that. And then interesting stuff that's just kind of unrelated. Sapiens, I recently listened to on Audible by Yuval Noah Harari. And I think one of the most incredible things, it's about a whole history of humankind, basically, from start to finish. And one of the incredible things I think I read in this book, for me as a British person, I think I was talking to Sky about this. If you watch his live streams, you know,
yeah, sometimes I do.
Yeah, and I think maybe the last time we were on, or the time before that. For me as a British person, I learn something new every single day about some shit Britain started in the world that's the way it is today. Like, I had no idea that Britain, like, I'll meet someone from, I don't know, fucking Myanmar or something, and they'll be like, oh yeah, that's when you guys were over here and did it. We were in Myanmar. I had no idea about this. As you get older as a British person, you had no idea about throughout your whole life just about how Britain played a role in like every single country in the world. They basically invaded or colonized almost bloody everywhere. And even the way that we tell the time, everything is to do with Britain. How the time zones are like, how we have a regulated time zone and stuff. It is Britain's doing. So Sapiens was an extraordinarily interesting read with regards to stuff like history, and talks a lot as well about speciesism in there, about the brutal stuff that happened to animals throughout history. So that's also a really good read.
Nice. Well, I'll share with you. I had one of the guests on my program was Lisa Lapel, and she was one of the people featured in Eternal Treblinka. There was this chapter, I don't know if you remember, it's towards the end, called Hitler's Baby. It was basically talking about some of the animal activists. So you may not remember this, because this was basically, he's sort of going through listing people. Anyway, she's an animal rights activist now, and she was a child who was dedicated to Hitler. Her parents were Nazis. When she was like 9 years old, she learned about this and basically rejected them. And she wrote this fantastic memoir called, I'm blanking on it. It's like something like Your Neighbor's Daughter or something like that. Anyway, I recommend it. She's quite an extraordinary person. Went to Africa to battle that government. She just had like an extraordinary life. It was just wild. Yeah, so that's a great book. I definitely recommend that one as well. So thanks for the book, Rex. Yeah. And, I said we were going to talk about that short story a little bit, but yeah, we never really did explore it. But uh, I mean, I know it's sort of self-explanatory, but I wonder if you could just like take me through. We kind of gave the synopsis a little bit, but what
Mhm.
were the sort of things that struck you about it and kind of spoke to you?
For me, I think it was the idea that the idea of being uncomfortable with the fact that someone else is suffering at the expense of other people's happiness. And that the most relatable part to me as a vegan is that the idea that this child who has to suffer in order for the city of Omelas to be this happy utopia, it reminds me so much of how non-vegans are with the idea of taking their precious bacon away. It's just like they have to accept the idea that pigs are screaming to death in gas chambers because they want this seemingly utopian world on the outside where they don't see it, where they just that's hidden away and they can just eat their bacon sandwich and get the delicious pleasure that comes from that. And the fact that they kind of remain comfortable with that while keeping that discomfort that's down there in their belly somewhere, just hidden. And then we're the ones who walk away. We're the ones who say, no, this is just not right. I can't deal with that. I don't want to remain. I will gladly forego my pleasures for this. Because me and you, Jeremy, we didn't stop eating animal products because we didn't like the taste.
Right.
We stopped because we realized that our pleasure should not derive at someone else's expense. So I think that was the thing that really struck me about that story. Just this state of kind of bliss that people around us are in, our family and friends. They're happy to be happy eating animal products, knowing that someone has to suffer for that. Whereas we aren't happy with that.
Yeah, yeah. And I like how it's described that every now and then people visit and they get
Mm,
upset and then they go back to their life and they just
yeah.
they just forget about it. Um
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. It reminds me actually now that you mention it of being at an outreach demo. Like I talked earlier about actually most people don't click on the link I give them the card. So they watch this demo. They watch this footage that we show them at the demo. They might even cry. They're like, "This is awful," and then they just go and eat their dinner that night.
mhm,
That's
mhm.
another great observation you've made. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I will say about that specific example that you're giving, it doesn't necessarily mean that they did go and, just because they didn't click on that link, they may have
Sure.
still connected. So
Yeah.
you don't want to overread into that, but obviously that's the only data point that you have, I guess.
Yeah.
Obviously, and we're going a little long, so I won't keep you too much longer, but I'm just curious, we talked about effectiveness. So when you're doing this sort of outreach, you're also making the videos. You've had your YouTube channel for a while. I saw you sort of play it with I think it was Natalie or somebody when you were saying that, like my top views are like 8,000 or something. But
Mhm.
you've got all these videos spread out over, you're appearing on other people's shows, you're appearing on my show, which is going to get you a full like, you'll get like one or two more subscribers out of this. Trust me.
Woo!
Yeah. um, or you'll lose. I
Yeah.
don't.
That's more like it,
Yeah.
yeah. Or you will.
Yeah. I would. Yeah. More like. But yeah, just like like obviously you're trying to maximize your impact by creating the videos and stuff, but talking about YouTube, and I'm fairly new to it, having done it for a year. Do you have any tips, or like and what are some of the things that you're most proud of with your channel, like some of the videos that you're like look back on, you like, that was it, that was like a banger of a video?
Yeah, I'd say one of the videos that I was most proud of at the time was my kind of 40-minute long video that kind of just debunks fully the idea of this consistent anti-oppression narrative. It was against a podcast that had done a segment on me, the Let's Rage Together podcast. And I did a massive deep dive on intersectional hypocrisy in that video, and I completely, in my opinion, decimated the idea that there is such thing as consistent anti-oppression, in that every single person's, and you would have heard me mention to Natalie on the podcast, every single person that you meet has an opinion that is considered bigoted, backwards, and oppressive to someone else, including intersectionals. Their shit, they think their shit don't stink, but it does. Every single political opinion that they hold is marginalizing or whatever to someone else. And I think I did a really good job in that video of explaining that so that it was unarguable at a time when I think so many people weren't really aware of how intersectionality worked and how it operated. And I think that must have been in about 2018, 19 that I made that video. So I was glad I kind of nailed it with that one. And I had people write to me, say that I opened their eyes and stuff with that vid. Another one I think was great to make, that I got, I guess, a sense of relief kind of from making, because I really kind of nailed my points in it as well, was the one I did recently about the AV's leaked financial report, but then I kind of twisted it to be about BLM's financial leakings.
Right.
Because I was saying, you know, and I got cancelled to hell for this during the whole BLM stuff, that like, who the fuck are you donating? Why have animal rights groups donating to this fucking organization? What are they doing with this money? Who are they? Why are you just plowing money into them? And I think I did a really, really good video exposing that. And I was, I think I nailed it as well with the ending where I said, but don't worry, everyone. At least that nasty racist's out of the White House. And then I showed a compilation satirically of Joe Biden saying a load of racist stuff. This was at the time when Trump got kicked out for Biden, because all the intersectionals were saying Trump is a racist. If you vote for Trump, you're a racist, blah, blah, blah. And I've long held that Joe Biden is the most racist president in our lifetime. That doesn't mean that if you vote for him, you're racist. But that's my consistent opinion. I don't believe that if you vote for Trump, that makes you racist. You vote for the president you want, who you think's going to enact the best policies, because you want to help America. You can't demonize people because of who they vote for. So I think I nailed it with that video as well. I think it was called like AV, BLM, and the elephant in the room, or I might have retitled it. And then the Omelas vid that I did recently, because it did get a few people talking, but the views are very low, so I was disappointed with that. I think only 600 people or so have watched it, but the people who did watch it, they said it was good. Yeah,
I agree. Just because it was unexpected, and I think that you know, one of the things that if I could offer a mild critique to content creators, vegan content creators, is that we are a little predictable. And I say that myself too. Like we kind of make the same video over and over again. That one stuck out because it was just unexpected and different.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what we've got to do. Now, that would be a bad example because it didn't get many views, disappointingly. But you're right, because let's say I was just to make a video called The Dark Truth About the Dairy Industry. Okay, there's literally like 1 million videos on YouTube called that has that. Right. Aaron Janus did Dairy is Scary. Everyone's seen it. 5 million views. I'm not going to make a video that's somehow going to get more views than that on The Dark Truth About the Dairy Industry. So we have to be a bit original and unique with our content. And that's what kind of I was hoping to do actually with that video, is make an observation that someone else hasn't brought to light yet. So I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
I really like the idea of like sort of finding these messages in pop culture or obscure culture even, and sort of bringing it to people's attention. So yeah, I really appreciate you, George. You're a lot of fun to talk to. Like you're a lot of fun to follow on socials, and your your YouTube channel. Like your debates are always fun and interesting and informative. So yeah, I really appreciate the work that you've been doing over the years, and thanks for putting in the work, like I said, over the years. Like, I mean, it's easy to like get discouraged about the vegan movement. You've had your criticisms of the vegan movement, but you know, you have not dropped out of it, and you just keep on plowing ahead. And yeah, it's just great. Like, I'm really glad. We're really lucky to have you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeremy. I really appreciate that. And you know who my favorite people in the animal rights movement are? The people on the left who don't make stuff, who don't make the animal rights movement about their own politics, as intersectionals tried to do. So I really appreciate guys like you and Wayne as well, Jeremy, who are solidly on the left, like you say you probably always will be. But at the same time, you realize that animal rights is its own separate movement. We're not the all lives matter people of the vegan movement like the intersectionals are.
And honestly, I say this like almost like feeling personally liberated, that animal rights is a liberating thing for me, because it's separate from politics. I can get away from politics, and that's what I hoped in some instances. It's also something that I have much more power over. Like, I can whine all day about Donald Trump. There's very little I can do about it. But there's, you know, I can do a lot about, you know, animals in my immediate vicinity and what I put in my mouth and what I advocate. So, yeah.
I think that, that reminds me of a quote Gary Yourofsky made about the whole Israel-Palestine stuff. He was basically saying, it was years ago he made this video, but he's like, why are people even coming for me about this? Why are people even trying to cancel me about this? As if my opinion even matters. Because history shows that when countries fight over a piece of land, they don't give a shit what anyone else thinks. So you and I, Jeremy, we can sit here all day talking about Israel, Palestine or whatever. It's not going to fucking change anything in most cases. This is the one thing, like you say, we actually have control. We can influence people, and we can change people's with the most powerful vote that they make every single day. They vote 3 times a day with their dollar.
They do. Yeah, I just think about that a lot. And to me, that's empowering. And I see that you've taken that on too. And yeah, like I had this feeling like, oh, the climate, it's, you know, the climate is collapsing. Well, what can I do about it? Nothing. I can't do shit about it. Okay. But I can do something about, you know, animal stuff. And then ironically, that helps the climate. So there you go.
There you go.
So, all right. Well, George, you're always welcome back on my channel. Just invite yourself on anytime. I'll invite you back on. It's not going to do a whole lot for you, but it's been fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, really appreciate the conversation.
All right. Take care.